Hydration isn't only for athletes training, it's for all of us. It's a huge part of daily maintenance. When I was in Japan back in July, I spent plenty of time outdoors, walking from place to place. Just a hot, sweaty mess. While those convenience stores along the way had some refreshing drinks like Pocari Sweat, there was one thing I wish I had brought along with me for the trip. Liquid IV, the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. I found out about Liquid IV after getting back, and I'll say the convenient packaging alone makes this a must-bring wherever you're going, be it any type of travel, business or pleasure, after a workout, sometime outside in the heat, or maybe just after a long night with friends. With only one stick and 16 ounces of water, Liquid IV hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone, while taking in 5 essential vitamins, that's B3, B5, B6, B12, and C, and 3 times the electrolytes as leading sports drinks. It comes in 12 tasty flavors. My favorite, personally, is strawberry lemonade and tropical punch. Real people, real flavor, real hydrating. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use Krewe of Japan, KREWEOFJAPAN, at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when shopping Better Hydration today using promo code Krewe of Japan at liquidiv.com. What are you waiting for? Get hydrated. Hello, I'm Doug, and welcome to the Krewe of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture.
This time on Krewe of Japan podcast.
Welcome back to our podcast. If you've ever Googled what's the best way to learn Japanese, I'm pretty sure you can literally find countless different recommendations, to the point that sifting through the vast sea of language learning resources out there can leave you feeling overwhelmed and lost. From traditional resources like textbooks and flashcards to immersive experiences like virtual language partners, or even following influencers on YouTube and social media. The choices can seem endless. But let's be honest, there is no singular cookie-cutter approach to learning the Japanese language. Sometimes you just have to mix it up in order to uncover the perfect blend of old school methods and new technology to help you conquer the Japanese language independently. In today's episode, we're joined by Walden Perry, a listener from right here in Louisiana, hailing from just up the I-10 in Baton Rouge. Walden reached out to us last summer with a language episode idea, specifically self-studying Japanese. We actually touched on this during our Season 4 recap episode. He mentioned how he himself had taken on the challenge of learning Japanese from nothing a few years back, and gotten to the point where he was actually planning to take the JLPT and won this past December, after only 2.5 years. He didn't pitch the idea of coming on as a guest when he reached out to us, but his language journey was so inspiring that we asked him to come on to talk about his story and his approach with us, as well as some of the challenges and successes that he experienced along the way. From traditional study tools,
I would consider study as 30 minutes a day with the flashcards. I also did grammar on flashcards, so that's kind of why they're all kind of jumbled up together. I would do 20 to 30 minutes of the vocab flashcards and maybe 10 or 15 minutes of grammar flashcards.
To virtual language exchanges with native speakers.
And I really just wanted to practice speaking. So I came to this saying, like, what can I do to push myself in speaking?
To the immersive power of platforms like YouTube.
At the start, I didn't understand much about it, but I could tell it was funny. But it's actually the channel where, as I got better at Japanese, I actually liked it even more.
You'll find out during this episode if Walden was able to crack the code for independent Japanese learning success. So whether you're a grizzled veteran of language learning or just dipping your toes into the world of Japanese, let this episode be a fun guide to unlocking fluency on your terms. Let's go. Here's what's going on with Japan Society New Orleans. Be sure to check the show notes for links and more information. Here we go. The 2024 Matsue New Orleans Sister City Exchange Program application is now live. This year celebrates the 30th anniversary of the Sister City relationship, and you won't want to miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Check the Japan Society website for more information, qualifications, and most importantly, the application itself. On Sunday, March 24th, Japan Society will be doing a group tour of the Go for Broke Spirit Legacy and Portraits exhibit at the World War II Museum. Check out the Japan Society event calendar for pricing and more details. For more information and details about these events and future events, follow us on the website and social media. Everything will be linked out in the show notes. Hope to see you there. All right, and we are back with our podcast, and Jen is here with me again, as always. Jen, hey, how are you doing?
Doing good. Ready to have another language episode. I find that these are like some of our most popular episodes that we have on the podcast. So it's always a pleasure to do some kind of language episode.
I think both of us have a little bit of a passion for learning the Japanese language to some degree,
We do, as rough as it is, we
Yeah.
do.
Right. So we brought with us today a special guest, a local guest, actually, not one from across the pond, Pacific Pond. Wait, everyone's that we've had for the most part has been in Japan, right?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
except for a few, but yeah.
Yeah, for the most part. Anyway, we are on a tangent right now of already, we're like literally a minute in, we're already on a tangent. Anyway, we have with us today a local guest who is just up the road from New Orleans in Baton Rouge and is someone who has gone on a pretty incredible self-study Japanese journey with a lot of other things that we're going to talk about later on. So I want to introduce Walden Perry. Walden, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, yeah. So my name is Walden. I'm a programmer. For the last few years or so, I've been learning Japanese by myself and having a ton of fun with it. So yeah, excited to talk about what I've done. I've also made a few videos on YouTube about my progress, so we'll probably talk about that as well.
Usually we ask people, what's your relationship to New Orleans? What have you been? But I mean, like, you're in Baton Rouge, so I'm sure you've been to New Orleans at some point in your history. You know?
Well, I was actually there this weekend because my brother just graduated from UNO. So
Hey, UNO!
Yeah.
I work there.
That's awesome, yeah.
So instead of asking you that question, we're going to ask you your relationship with Japan. Like, what got you interested in Japan and whether or not you've had any travel experiences over there. So take it away.
I mean, as a kid, Japan was always like centered around gaming for me, like Nintendo. And actually, I was really into Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid.
Me too.
And both of those, I didn't realize until maybe high school or whatever that was actually from Japan. It wasn't just like for kids or whatever that I was used to. But yeah, I kind of started getting interested there around like the gaming side and the technology side and the culture side. But
did you play the card game?
Oh, I played the card game a ton.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, we used to like for Christmas and stuff as kids, my mom would put up a calendar and she would buy card packs and put cards in all the little slots to give us Yu-Gi-Oh cards once a day for Christmas, which is tons of fun.
So when we're recording this, it's like, what, a week and a half before Christmas?
So it's right around Christmas.
We're doing that with my son with Pokemon cards. So that little holiday calendars and stuff like that. Yep. So yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just...
Yeah, and really my journey with Japan more seriously, though, starts with coronavirus, where everybody kind of had a lot of free time there. And around that time, I thought I wanted to challenge myself with something new, because I've taught myself a lot of things in the past, like programming is the main one, but I taught myself video editing and music and lots of stuff. But I thought with this corona thing is a great opportunity, stuck at home and everything, you know, I wanted to do something with my time. And I wanted to do something I'd never done before, something totally out of left field, out of like my mainly computer focused activities. And that's when I kind of drew back to my childhood in Japan. And I thought, hey, you know what, let's give this Japan thing a shot. What is it even like to learn a language? And so then I kind of just started poking around on the internet, and it turns out it's a lot of fun to learn this language. Yeah, I guess that's where it got started with me.
Okay.
I mean, if we go a little bit later, actually last year or this year, it's still this year. This year in March, I went to Japan for the first time.
Oh, great.
And had an opportunity to go and use that.
Put it in action, huh?
Right, yeah. Go and use all of the language I've been studying.
Awesome.
Did you find it hard to find opportunities here in Louisiana to learn Japanese? And like, did you prefer the self-study that you went on? Or, you know, would you have rather tried like a classroom setting?
Frankly, I didn't even look. I kind of assumed that it wouldn't be possible.
I feel like there's only a few places you can do it here. Universities pretty much being almost exclusively and there's a few local, I don't know if I say tutors, but like some people have some classes that they do, but that's even online. So
if you're online, you can do it anywhere, you know, and
yeah, you don't need someone local.
We also have to consider that this is right at the point where I was out of college too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just graduated a year prior before I started studying. So I was already out of college. I don't even think my university had Japanese. So, I mean, it wouldn't have even been possible there. But I think if I was still in college and there was a Japanese class, I would have attempted it. But given that wasn't my opportunity, and plus, I have quite a long history of self-studying things.
Okay.
And that's the way I wanted to do it.
I tried self-study, I think in high school. And maybe I was just too young to self-study at that point, because I was good at it for like 2 weeks, and then it just fell off because, everything else I was studying in school took precedent.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do that when you're juggling, 7 other subjects. In college, that's where I took my Japanese. I took it in a university setting, in classroom, both in the US for 2 years. And then also when I did my study abroad year, I took like I would say it wasn't like intensive study, but they had class every day for an hour and a half every day.
Yeah, study abroad seems so cool. I wish I would have had that opportunity.
Well, talk to Jen after this call, and
Yep.
she can let you know about some opportunities coming up. But embarking on language learning adventures just through self-study, that can be daunting to people. You have to
Sure.
really know what you want to do. What did you feel was your biggest hurdle and your most overwhelming barrier when you were studying Japanese?
Well, really at the start, I had no expectations for myself. And I think that's one of the keys to my success here is that, and really this has been true for everything that I've succeeded at learning. I mean, I've said the things I succeeded at learning, but there's a lot of things I didn't succeed at learning. And I found that if I'm going in like, yeah, I want to be X in 3 months, or I have some kind of like predisposition about what learning is, that you kind of can't enjoy the journey anymore. All you're focused on is the results.
Right.
And so, in this mindset of this weird coronavirus time, which is where I started, I just like wanted to fill my time with something new, try something new. And I had no expectations. I knew it would be really hard. Like it seemed really hard. But yeah, I just figured out how to make it fun. And that's really what kept me going the whole time. At the start, I didn't know what was fun about it, but I kind of allowed my mind to be open and receive that, and find that for myself. And if I didn't find it fun, I would have quit. I think that's the reality of it.
Yeah. You got to make it fun or you're going to be miserable trying to do something like learning a language.
For sure.
Because actually one of my worries when I started was I really hated learning Spanish in high school.
Me too.
Yeah. And I did have in the back of my mind, like, this is just a waste of time. I didn't like Spanish. Maybe I just can't learn a language or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it did take a little bit of self-reflection to say, okay, let's just put that behind us and just try to experience this new. Let's try to not think of this in the context of those grammar worksheets I was given, and just like, what is it like if I just want to have fun doing this? And it actually turns out it's very different. One of the biggest things that I realized self-studying Japanese was that all throughout school, you have these milestones and these tests and things like that. And I realized, like, because I do a lot of flashcards, and I realized during my flashcards that I don't actually have to remember any of these words.
Yeah, you're not obligated to.
I'm not obligated to remember any of these words. And so when I realized that, I think this was about a year in, I just started deleting words that I was struggling with. And then later I'd come back and, maybe a year later I'd see it again. And it's like, oh, I remember that word. I didn't like you. But, now I've grown as a person, and maybe that word can come into me. That's a weird turn of phrase, but but you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Doing it on your own.
You can pick your own battles.
You pick your own battles, and you pick the way you go. You pick which avenues you want to go. You don't have an agenda or like a syllabus. And that's for me, when we talk about hurdles in a school program, you're kind of like given hurdles to jump over. Right.
Right.
And so in self-study, you make your own hurdles and you make them as high as you want. You make them higher. Maybe you go faster, but maybe it hurts more. Right.
Yeah. Like you said, you can't give yourself like these hardcore milestones that if you don't really think you can get there. Like you want to challenge yourself, but you don't want to like make it impossible where you get frustrated or defeated attitude, and then give up.
Just to be honest, I have a lot of experience doing that to myself. Like I'm really obsessed about this and many things. And it's like, I really want to do a good job and push myself. And then, there's always this give and take where I push myself and then I've got to like bring it back because I know I stopped enjoying it when I pushed myself too hard. That's always the tension for me, where it's like, I like it too much that I make it unfun, right?
Some people like feel the pressure. Like you said, there's no syllabus, there's no agenda to guide your study, but people want to give themselves some kind of structure and then inadvertently give themselves too much or maybe just too demanding.
Yeah, like they create such an impossible wall to climb. And I find this with a lot of people who, are self-studying and they got the beginner level down packed and now they're trying to do that intermediate level. And that's where I find a lot of people start struggling, is that intermediate, course material that you would usually go through. I find that's when, they really set these walls up that it's so hard to climb. And I find it really difficult myself sometimes.
Yeah, because as an intermediate level, you've been through this beginner stage where you improve at a rapid rate. Yeah. And you get to intermediate and you feel like you should be able to keep going, especially because the beginner stage is very long. Like it's not like you can do the beginner stage in a month. It still takes a long time.
It does, yeah.
It's just kind of human nature. And I think really part of my success is recognizing that that is there and inside of me and like fighting against it on the side of also doing the language, being okay with that aspect of myself.
I remember you said earlier that you were using flashcards at one point. What other resources did you use to help guide your self study with Japanese? Like, did you use textbooks even though you weren't in a classroom setting, or were you only using like online platforms? Or, out of all the things that you have used, what did you find to be most effective for your self study?
There's so many things you can choose at the start. And I happened to come across Japanese from Zero from Mr. George Trombley, who honestly has kind of become like a pretty big idol of mine. He's a really nice guy and makes some great videos. And it really inspired me at the start. I actually have all the books back here, but I only went through like 2 of them before I dropped it. But I think what those Japanese from Zero's videos did for me is give me the inspiration to go and learn Japanese and separate that Spanish class mindset from my mindset that I have today. I continue to have of making Japanese be fun and like learning for learning's sake and all of that stuff. But that's where I started. I also did Duolingo at the start for about 2 months or so. Right about there, I actually stopped learning and I took a break. I had other stuff in my life come up, like family issues and stuff, and it caused me to have to put it down. And it took me a while, even after that was over, it took me a while to want to come back to it. Mm-hmm. And when I did, I ended up doing the immersion approach. And I pretty much just started watching YouTube. And it's probably, we're going to talk about YouTube a lot over this conversation, I bet, because it's the vast majority of how I learned Japanese. Like I just watched YouTube. And then from there, the main study loop is watching native content, reading native content, and then trying to find little bits and pieces that you almost understand, but you're missing something, and then trying to go figure out that little piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
As I did that, I kind of ended up in this weird space where I didn't want to follow a textbook anymore, but I used all kinds of different textbooks as reference where, there was something I didn't know, like a grammar point or a word I didn't know and I wanted more detail. I would go and seek out that specific piece of information. And a lot of times those did come from common textbooks. Mm-hmm. And Japanese from Zero as well. I use that, especially in the beginning, quite a lot. He has got a lot of videos on certain grammar points and stuff at the earlier level. So in terms of flashcards, I'm using the tried and true Anki system, where I can go through and while I'm doing my immersion, once I find that little nugget of information I didn't know, I can turn that into a flashcard very easily. And so that's kind of like my main loop there, where I'll do all these flashcards during the day as I watch my videos, and then later I'll go through and review them. So that's kind of the main process there. And there's been tons of little bits and bobs in between. Like one of the examples I used in my video was I did a Anki deck on the Japanese states, the names of the prefectures and their locations. Mm-hmm. So I've done little bits and bobs like that, which kind of help me fill in the gaps and stuff.
Yeah.
If there's any other more specific questions, I can go in there, but that's the main stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, each learner is going to be different. I know I'm a big avid flashcard user. I'm just really good with flashcards. I don't understand why. I really do like the whole memorized vocabulary.
Yep.
Whereas if you were to be like, so let's do these translations of these sentences, I'm like, so, yeah. I mean, each learner is going to be different about what they use.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very poor experience in translation. I basically never practiced it. I don't really study kanji individually, or I don't learn onyomi readings or whatever. Like, I just kind of like lived Japanese for, at this point, almost 3 years. And you just kind of pick it up over time, the things that are important. You kind of start to realize all of these things that you can explicitly study. But yeah, I didn't choose to go that route.
There's another thing that I saw that if you don't know how a sentence or a piece of grammar is used, you just like drop that grammar point or whatever in Google. Because if you drop it there, it just returns either the exact meaning of it or why or how it's used. And sometimes that is in English and sometimes it's in Japanese. But then it'll show you a lot of examples like in action. And I feel like that's the downside of like flashcards, is that you learn all these pieces to the puzzle, right? But then you don't know how the pieces fit together. Like you see all the pieces, they're all over the place, and you don't know how they fit. And the flashcards are great for building up all the pieces, getting all your pieces on the table. But then the grammar and those kind of things of like how they flow together really is like making the puzzle work, right? And coming together.
Yeah, that's why I sound like a child.
Yeah.
You mentioned immersion learning, and that's where it kind of comes in, because you get to hear and experience all those things in action in a fully immersive environment. And we've actually covered, immersion learning quite a bit on this podcast, not specifically in one single episode, but we've had multiple episodes. Our first season, we had Matt versus Japan. Another season, we had Dogen come on and talk about pitch accent, but he's also a huge advocate for immersion learning. Game Gengo come on and talk about immersion learning through video games. We've had Daniel Morales, who came on in season 2, I believe, talk about immersion through literature and reading and things like that. Each of those people that we talked with really emphasized how immersion can really help you grow in your language journey. First of all, like, did you watch any of those guys when you were?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I was about to say, like,
oh yeah, you can't miss it, really, especially if you're obsessed as I was.
Yeah,
Matt versus Japan definitely made a big influence over me, especially some of his earlier videos.
mm-hmm.
You know, when it comes to immersion, I actually think one of my big mistakes about it was, you know, I had only done 2 of those Japanese from 0 books, and I kind of jumped right into immersion. And I just literally like was not studying at all for that first year. And I was just kind of like going at it, doing my flashcards, whatever. And I don't think that was particularly effective. Just to be honest, I really think that, and this is what I do now in order to try to continue to push my language forward, is you've got to do some amount of like quote unquote study along with the immersion, or it's just not going to ever click.
Right. Well, you got to reinforce what you're hearing, or maybe using, you got to build a foundation for what you're hearing to reinforce, basically. You know, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I think you can totally do immersion from day one. I actually remember the first time I did like quote unquote immersion, I was listening to a podcast. And after like 10 minutes, I heard them say senshu. And I was like, I know a word. It was like, you know, last week. I heard a word. And it really was like this rush of emotions of like, wow, I just like did Japanese. And it really starts out like that, where it's like you get nothing at the start.
Yeah.
Which is why I think I gravitated towards videos, where you actually get a lot more from the visual aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. So, you know, what kind of like books or movies or videos? I know you mentioned YouTube, but did you do anything else? Like, what helped give you some enjoyment while you're doing this? You know, I'm sure you didn't want to pull out like only news, like readings of like, or, you know, news broadcasts where it's kind of like, this is dry. You want something enjoyable, that, but right?
I've actually been reading NHK a little bit lately, and I was like, oh, some of these are interesting. But I really think, unless you like, because I wasn't big into Japanese media before.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know what I was into. I just had to explore and find out. You know, so like I did at the start watch some anime, and I was like, yeah, this anime stuff's not really for me. But I did get into a lot of different types of YouTube content. I'd say mostly around like gaming, like Let's Plays and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've also got really into VTubers, into that whole section of YouTube, which very much divides people at some points.
Doug.
But yeah, I mean, I've watched so many different types of YouTube channels, and I mean, actually, they do kind of rotate in and out. So we can talk about like my favorite YouTube channel, which is this guy called Kun. Kun, he's a gaming YouTuber.
Uh-huh.
And he has this very popular series called 50-Person Minecraft.
Oh, God.
Goju ni Minecraft is in Japanese. And this thing, it's almost like a Minecraft reality show, because they've got hundreds of his listeners that come on at various points in and out of the server. And they do crazy like video ideas, like different Minecraft challenges, or there's also a lot of like real life stuff where they're just like kind of talking, but it's all in Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've come to really like about it is that, you know, all of these people come back again and again to the server. So you kind of get to know the personalities of everyone. It's very funny. And at the start, I didn't understand much about it, but I could tell it was funny. But it's actually the channel where, as I got better at Japanese, I actually liked it even more. Whereas there's a lot of other channels where once I got better at Japanese, I fell off because I realized maybe they're just like screaming at the camera or whatever. Maybe not as interesting. But yeah, Kun's very, very intelligent, very funny. So he's been great to study from if you want to talk about it transactionally.
Okay.
One of the things I also really like about YouTube is subtitles. So a lot of Japanese YouTube videos do terepro, which is like teleprompter. That's the word they use to describe the subtitles that come at the bottom of the screen. And they'll actually use tons of different sound effects and different colors and animations on the text to really make it part of the experience. But as like a learner, you can go and look at those and you could study from that. You know, so if you're like, well, what did they say? If it's on the screen, you know, you can really just read it, get a lot of information from that.
Yeah.
Which is great. This is one of the great aspects of YouTube.
Yeah, I find a lot of Japanese YouTubers bring those like subtitles that you see on Japanese TV into their channels.
Yep.
Yeah. And actually, I remember that reminds me too of like when we spoke with Matt from Gengo. he mentioned a lot of the video games, they have like a lot of transcripts that you can use to follow along with the game sometimes. So that way, if you need help for like the interactions where it's like vocal and not like necessarily written out on the screen, they have the scripts there that you can read and kind of follow along with. And I forget where he mentioned them in somewhere. But go listen to that episode if you're interested in learning more about that.
I did play some games as well. And I've also done quite a bit of reading. One of the other things, along when we talk about immersion, I actually like to think about learning in general in Japanese as a form of immersion that is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, I discovered GeoGuessr in Japanese, this game where you get dropped in the world at a random place in Google Maps and you've got to guess where you are. And it turns out there's so much strategy and things to learn in that and things to learn about the world. And actually, Kuhn was playing this in one of his videos, or he'll have all of these crazy little tricks that you learn. And I was learning all of those tricks in Japanese. And so my GeoGuessr skill, as I was getting into that, watching different people and reading guides online or whatever, I'm reading it in Japanese, I'm listening in Japanese. I wanted to learn about this thing independently, right? Mm-hmm. But now, I was already somewhat decent at Japanese at that point where I was able to do that. But if you do that and push yourself, even if you're struggling to understand, if you're learning something you want to know about, that can make it a lot more compelling to go into and spend the time to understand. It makes you want to understand it more.
Sure.
And for things like, as a programmer, I actually read some books on programming in Japanese. I just wanted to see what that was like, and how they describe things. Certainly, they have the disadvantage of all of the keywords being in English for programming languages. And it's funny to see them talk about that. When I realized I can just learn about things in Japanese, you're kind of doing two things at once there. And it really is cool. And also to get the perspective of another culture on how they teach something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that it can be different, how they talk about it.
Sure. That reminds me, actually, I forget if it was when I was on JET or if it was when I was studying abroad, but definitely while I was studying abroad, I got into shogi. A friend of mine was really into it and he kind of taught me how to play. And then I bought a book. It's fully in Japanese, a guide to beginner's strategy and stuff like that. My language level is still at that point. There's a little furigana and stuff like that, but it was a challenge. But it was really interesting to kind of learn that because you learn all these new ways of using words and things like that when they're explaining. Mm-hmm. And same thing when I was on JET, they had lesson plans that were given to us from our Board of Education. And those lesson plans were written for the most part in Japanese, except for a couple clumps that were in English that were meant for us. But I enjoyed actually going through the Japanese section, explaining how to teach and execute a lesson plan in the verbiage that they used in those situations. That was my way of studying. Every day I would look at the lesson plan and all right, I don't know this word. What does it mean? Why are they using it this way? That's another really interesting way of looking at it, learning in a different language.
Yeah, it's funny you say shogi. I actually read a book on Go.
Oh, yeah.
I really wanted to figure out what was going on with those little black and white pieces. And it turns out I didn't really like it too much, but at least now I understand what they're doing.
Given our location of Louisiana, we have extremely limited opportunities for a Japanese-speaking environment. And we get it a ton of times for Japan Society of New Orleans. Oh, I'm interested in learning, but I can't find anything. And we're yeah, we're feeling that too. So, how do you actively find an opportunity to practice and improve your speaking skills? Do you rely on online sources to engage in online language exchange with other Japanese learners and native speakers, maybe? Because I always see these commercials about sites where, language learners go on and y'all can do an exchange of some sorts of languages. Have you used any of those? Do you find that helpful?
Yeah, well, I just want to start off here and saying speaking is definitely my weakest area. And it's one of my big goals for next year is to try to improve my speaking. But I've done 100 hours of italki lessons.
Okay.
So I do have a fair bit of experience at this point. It did take me about a year and a half to speak at all. I would say it wasn't even intentionally. It really is just there is no opportunities here to do something in real life.
Yeah, it's very minimal. Unless and there's a small community for sure.
I did turn to italki, and I've had some great tutors on italki, but I really try to make these sessions for myself. Maybe that sounds selfish, but let me explain here. You can do italki as a class. You can sign up for them and say, hey, I'll do 6 weeks with you. You go over Genki and we'll go through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and here's some homework. You can actually do that on italki.
Okay.
But for me, And first of all, I'd already been studying a year and a half on my own, and I really just wanted to practice speaking. So I came to this saying, like, what can I do to push myself in speaking? I would come up with various little like icebreaker type of things where there's like a little challenge for the lesson or whatever. Or like I would have to say these 8 phrases in our hour-long conversation, but we're not actually talking about the grammar. I'm just like, I've learned these phrases, I want to use them. Let's use them together. I also wrote a bunch of essays, and I would have my teacher go through them with me. And by the way, we're doing all this in Japanese. So I'm like asking, can you help me fix this grammar in Japanese? I'm hearing the corrections in Japanese, at least as much as possible. Definitely not 100%, but I would say the vast majority of the time I'm able to do all of that in I wasn't before. I struggled a lot at the start, but eventually I became able to do that over time. But the thing about italki, of course, is you're paying per session. I've spent quite a bit of money there, but when it comes to going further, I think I got to make some friends at some point and like just kind of talk to people normally. That is something I want to do, like join some communities online or something, maybe like, people who watch the YouTubers I watch.
Then can I make a suggestion for you?
Oh, sure.
Are you on Instagram?
I am not.
I think you would benefit from doing an Instagram account. I, follow a ton of like Japanese accounts of just like regular people, like no one famous or anything like that. But like if they show a picture of like a really super cool cake that they saw in a shop and they took a picture of it, I'll like say in Japanese, "Oh, that's so cute. Where is that?" And then they'll start a conversation with me. I actually have a friend that I made from Instagram who lives in Osaka, and both of us are kind of like the same age. And I really found it very helpful to just gain friends from social media. And I found Instagram to be really easy to do because you have like those Japanese hashtags that you can look up and you can see like, oh, who's posting about this thing? If you're looking for that kind of thing, that is what I suggest because that's kind of what I stumbled upon.
Yeah, that kind of thing is a great idea. I have this weird like anti-Facebook thing, so I'm not going to be doing that. But yeah, I've actually wanted to do that on Hello Talk, like essentially the same thing on Hello Talk, which is maybe a little more focused. But yeah, I wouldn't be against that kind of thing. And I think really it's like, I've got to make the time to do that and kind of get over some kind of like hump of like, okay, I've just never really done this before. It's like another thing. I was like, I got to get used to doing this and talking to people. Because like most of my writing has been these like essays and it's kind of like formal language and stuff. Obviously I can do it, but haven't tackled that one yet.
So I have a couple of suggestions, Sven. And this is not just for only you, but other listeners out there. 2 of our former guests, we had mentioned Daniel Morales earlier. He does a Japanese language book club where they pick like a passage or a short essay or something like that. And then you get together and discuss it in Japanese after they read it. So something like that. It's a small community. I don't know how they do it. I think it's they have a Facebook group. I know. Sorry, no Facebook, but I'm sure they don't meet on Facebook. They meet on like Zoom or something. Similarly, Kasha, the founder of Ikigai Connections, one of our Japan Society partners, and also she was a guest last season on for our career episode, looking for Japanese jobs. She has a group that's called Kizuna, where they meet, I want to say once a month or some frequency. There's like a regular occurrence when they meet. And it's just a group for people to get together and speak in Japanese, practice their like language skills, like your Planet Fitness of language. No one's judging you. You all levels welcome, and kind of just for an hour to get together and kind of talk. And they have like little breakout sessions on Zoom where you can kind of go in small groups and chat with people. And
that really sounds like what I need right now.
I will send you the information for that separately outside of this, but it's definitely something. If anyone here is on Facebook, check it out. It's called Kizuna, Kizuna. Kasha posts about it all the time on her Ikigai Connections page too. So those kind of groups are great.
Yeah, and for italki, I love my italki teacher. She's been great and helped me so much. But it is different when you can have like, it's just not a transaction. You're just kind of hanging out. Like it's just a little different, Yeah. And that's an experience I haven't had many opportunities to have.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things with speaking though, and I was just really shocked about this when I did my first italki lesson. It's like all of the Japanese that I've been learning like was not able to come out.
Yeah.
Because I had never practiced that aspect of it before. And like, I have read that, but when I really experienced it for myself, I was like, wow, I'm going back to like straight up watashi wa Walden desu. Like just nothing, Yeah. It took me like a while to build that up to where I was like getting close to the level of like my comprehension in media versus my comprehension in talking.
Yeah.
And still the comprehension in media is so much higher, but I'm able to express myself pretty coherently at this point.
It's really like a switch in your brain that has to flip at some point. And the only way it's going to flip is if you got to go through the marshy swampland of struggle to get to that switch. It's overcoming a lot of things, like overcoming the sound of your own voice in a different language, overcoming the fact that you are going to sound unintelligent at some points, you say things that don't make any sense. And it's not like because you aren't intelligent, it's just that you haven't connected the dots yet, or that you have connected the dots, but connecting the dots on paper, like you said, is a lot easier to do on paper than it is verbally when you're thinking about things and trying to communicate simultaneously while thinking about it.
Especially the thing that gets me is like, I know how to say it in English,
Yeah.
And it's like, when I'm the most successful talking in Japanese, I'm not translating from English into Japanese. I'm just talking in Japanese.
Yeah, same.
Then that's a very difficult place to get to.
It is. And that's part of that swampy marshland. It's not like a 4-step approach. You got to go from listening, translating back into Japanese, what you want to say in English, and then saying it. You got to make it just a listen and respond, like 2-prong. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I feel that to the core. I still struggle with that to this day. And I don't study diligently at all, or just I don't study as much as I used to.
Honestly, I feel like that might be coming for me too at this point.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of at this like upper intermediate advanced level where I'm like quite good at Japanese. I read books, I watch videos, and I understand most of the things. And I have been thinking like, how long am I going to like keep going like this? Where it's like I'm actually kind of doing these flashcards and studying as a part of every day of my life. And I do kind of feel like it's coming to an end soon.
Yeah. But like you said, it's just a matter of how do you adapt and evolve. You've gone through that part of your journey, but then it's like you got to take it a step further. Like you got to change like your goal. Like your goal is no longer like this intense study to get proficient at the language. It's now using it in everyday life.
Exactly.
Actively speaking and communicating in that language. I briefly mentioned journey just a second ago, but one thing that's cool about your journey is how you've tracked your own language growth through your YouTube. Like you've documented your journey. You have at least 2. The 2 I saw. I don't know if you have more or how many more you have. I think it's really encouraging for people out there to see you go through and just go through that journey with you and experience like the trials and tribulations and kind of see the progress in action, because that can motivate other people and other language learners at the same time.
Well, and then not only did you, help people see your process, but then you, as bad as it sounds, like you kind of made yourself accountable for yourself. Like,
Sure.
now I've done this and now I got to keep doing it because I posted a video.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it like that actually, but now I'm scared. I need to make a third one.
No. I'm sorry.
The pressures of content creation.
Genuinely, I know there's a lot of people who are like doing language learning YouTube as a career. I have no intentions of doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm best able to express myself with video. And I thought for me, I wanted to make a couple videos just for me to remember what I am doing with my life right now.
Yeah.
Because I actually had another YouTube channel before I started Japanese. I did like a coding YouTube channel.
Okay.
And one of the things I dropped it off for was for doing Japanese. And at this point, I actually started a Minecraft YouTube channel, which one of the things that I am a little bit salty about is my 2 Japanese YouTube videos have done way better than my entire Minecraft channel, which I spent a year on. But that's just how it goes, I guess. Yeah, they're great videos. I think it really shoots up every year over January, like noticeably. I think people are looking at like they're doing New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
I want to learn Japanese.
Okay.
The reason I made those videos is I really wanted to show somebody who isn't really wanting to learn languages like full time or something. I just had this weird thing about Japanese. I wanted to learn it. And I wanted to show what someone who like realistically puts in all of their effort can do.
Mm-hmm.
Because frankly, I am putting in 2, 3, 4 hours most days. But I really think that it's not actually that high effort. Like I'm mostly watching YouTube and just being active about looking up words and stuff. And I got this far just doing that. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like that much, but it's just so many hours at this point, and the dedication not to give up is a big one too.
Did you find it hard to balance self-study and life? It takes a lot of discipline and things like that to really stay focused and stay on your routine. Like if I think you mentioned you had a routine, right? You were studying, doing that like for a few hours a day for
Yep.
like the study. And then you do the immersion like
Well, no, the immersion was the few hours a day. The study.
Got it. Okay.
I would consider study as 30 minutes a day with the flashcards.
Okay.
I also did grammar on flashcards. So that's kind of why they're all kind of jumbled up together. I would do 20 to 30 minutes of the vocab flashcards and maybe 10 or 15 minutes of grammar flashcards. And the grammar flashcards, they don't have much explanation in there. And I would go on the side and look up textbooks and stuff if I wanted to as well.
Yeah.
So study was very weird and there was not very much of it. I just kept going. I just like pushed through it. I didn't really want to study for 4 hours. Like I just watched Minecraft videos. Like it really felt like that. I'm just using Japanese.
Discipline was needed, but you were making it the thing that was going to take up the time was something you enjoyed. So it wasn't like it was a chore, basically, right?
Exactly. And at the start, I found it very difficult to keep up the flashcards.
Yeah.
I was skipping, like with Anki, you really want to do it every day. And I'm not really going to go into that. You can look it up if you don't know about Anki. But you really need to do that every day to do the like memory system correctly. And I was missing days a lot in the beginning. And then after like a year and a half, I just stopped missing days because I just got used to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't think I have that much discipline, but I think if I look at it objectively, it took a lot of discipline to make it this far.
Did you have to like make yourself like carve out time? You say, all right, time to sit down. It's like not 7 o'clock. It doesn't have to be like precise, but time to sit down. I need to sit down and look at these videos or kind of like make yourself do it, like get yourself in some kind of routine or help manage your time in making sure you hit your quote unquote milestone for the day.
I actually forgot that my first 2 years, I time tracked all of my Japanese. That was a big part of my videos.
That's right. I remember seeing that now. Yeah.
But I forget because I haven't done it in a year. But yeah, at the start, I did have this goal where I wanted to do 100 hours every month in Japanese. And that was just an arbitrary goal based off of how much time I wanted to put in. One thing that's interesting is I actually started the time tracking in order to avoid not putting too much time into Japanese. Because I had this really big worry that I was going to do 7 hours a day and just like destroy the rest of my life. But that really never happened. Like I've had that situation in programming before where like in college and stuff, I was doing the entire day.
Yeah.
I wanted to not be like that anymore. So I was trying to keep it to 3 or 4 hours a day and I was getting there very easily. There were definitely times when I was doing the time tracking where I said to myself, okay, we've got 7 days left. I'm not on pace. Let's push a little harder for this week. So I think it would be disingenuous to say I wasn't really paying too much attention to it and doing a lot of hours. I was absolutely paying attention to it. But I think it was really like the time tracking was just about making sure I wasn't doing too much. But also it was telling myself that you've done enough. There were so many times where I was disappointed in my progress. Yeah. And in those times, I would go look at my numbers in my time tracking and say, look how many hours you did this month. You did 90 hours of this or whatever. Right. You are doing it. You guys got to keep going. And I would have to tell myself this. And hopefully I wouldn't be sad after. Sometimes I was anyway. But
yeah, well, it helps, like you said, reinforce the fact that you are putting in the time, you are doing the work, you are trying to better your skill. And you have bad days when you're doing anything, right? Like language learning included. There's some days when you just feel like $1,000,000, but then there's days like you feel like you don't know anything. I mean, it comes with anything you do.
Yeah, and I feel like you kind of expressed that in the beginning, like how you personally find learning Japanese to be fun if you try to commit yourself to learning Japanese on like a hourly basis. Like I have to put in this many hours this day, and if I don't, oh my God.
Or you need your Duolingo streak.
Yeah. That. You're going to take the fun out of it, I guess, is what I would think.
And another thing is, I think I would also be lying if I didn't say they were things I sacrificed in my life to do Japanese. Like I essentially stopped watching English YouTube for the most part. And that was a big part of my life before. But it just kind of went away. I stopped playing as much video games as I did before. I basically didn't play video games at all for 2 years. And I'm actually only now getting back into it a little bit. I did have to give up other hobbies. And for me, Japanese was more fun and it won out. But I think, if you're learning and you have other things in your life, you think you have at some point you have to look at everything and say, okay, am I going to give things up or am I going to be okay? It's going to take me 10 years because it really takes a long time. And I happen to be someone who with my life situation, was able to put in 3 or 4 hours and it didn't disrupt my life too much.
Sure.
And I do understand that that's not the case for most people. So, I mean, even watching my videos where I made them saying like, okay, here's just some realistic guy. But I mean, even still, I think most people probably like, especially if you're like, an adult and you've got a family or whatever, like you can't do 3 or 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I don't really have any advice for that other than it's just going to take you longer, And, honestly, I'm guilty of it too, where I'll look at the people who are like, yeah, I'm 15 and I do 8 hours a day. And I'm like, oh, come on. Why can't I do 8 hours a day? I mean, like, even at like some people would look at me and say, wow, that's so much. But, like there's always someone doing more than you, and you have to be comfortable with wherever you are, and you have to decide where you want to be. I think that's the critical part.
Yeah, and I feel like that's why I can't watch other people's Japanese language learning videos, their journeys, because then I start comparing myself to them. I'm like, but that doesn't mean that just because they're doing it, that I need to do it, or like because they're doing this and I'm doing the same thing, but they're getting it and I'm not.
And a lot of times they're not getting it, like a lot of times, like, because and I've actually explicitly in this, conversation, I've not said I've actually done 12,000 flashcards. Like I've tried not to put my numbers out there because, at the end of the day, my numbers are the point in time for me right now.
Yeah.
Wherever you are in your journey, your numbers are going to be different.
Yeah.
I can sit here and brag about all the time I put in, but I've just happened to already have done it. People who are earlier in their journey, like I was at the start, they're not going to have those numbers. And I can tell you also, like, even at my level, sometimes I look at a news article and I'm like, what is going on here? I just have no idea.
Yeah.
And that still happens to me.
Oh, all the time. So you just got back from taking the JLPT N1 earlier this month.
You're brave.
Yeah.
Was that something that was your goal early on, or does it you kind of like, as you started to progress through the years? Because earlier you said you didn't have like, you wanted this to be fun. You didn't want to like put yourself in a box. But at some point you were like, I'm actually getting pretty good at this. When did you decide that you wanted to take the JLPT N1? Like, when was that like, that is my new target?
Actually, very early on. I mean, you can't go on the internet in Japanese language learning culture and not see the N1. It's kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
I did get this kind of like allure to it as like the highest level. And so I think about a year ago is when I actually thought for real, like, hey, I might be able to take this. And so, yeah, I finally was able to take it at this point 2 weeks ago, December 3rd. And yeah, I got really close. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to pass. I think I'm right on the line. It really could go either way. But studying for this test, I'm really studying, though. I did about 3 months of real prep for it.
Yeah.
And when I say I studied hard, we split the immersion and the studying, like I said before. I was doing like 1 or 2 hours of that studying, which, I mean, maybe isn't a lot for some people. But that was like the hardest I've studied for anything. Yeah. This whole journey in Japanese, really, like I went through every single grammar point on the test, like a couple hundred. And I was like, wow, I actually see these now. I'm reading books and stuff, and these grammar points I studied are coming up. And that's when I realized like this test actually is really not like crazy hard Japanese. It's really just like normal literary level, like college level Japanese. It's not like easy Japanese, but it's not like unknown, unused Japanese.
Yeah.
And so once I realized that, then I started falling down like the pit of despair again. It's like, oh my God, wow, I actually have a lot more to go than I thought I did, But then, you pick yourself up from that. And I had to go back and study a lot of beginner grammar again, because I realized like, wait, I don't know this. I don't know this. I don't know this. And I realized like, I actually needed to extract so much information from these paragraphs to understand the comprehension questions.
Yeah.
Like you actually have to understand very minute details, because the answers to the reading comprehension questions are very like, the differences are very minute.
Right.
So even if you understand what they're saying, you might not be able to pick the correct answer. And so that was very difficult for me. The listening was also very difficult at the start, but I did a lot of practice sections and I ended up getting pretty decent at that. And then vocab was really easy for me, thanks to the flashcards.
Okay.
It really pushed me to a higher level. Like it really and truly did. And I just got finished reading like a light novel yesterday. And I was just thinking like, there's so much in this I wouldn't have gotten had I not done that 3 months of studying. Yeah, I think it was a great experience, whether I pass or not. It doesn't matter for me. I'm not trying to do anything with it.
Sure.
I just really wanted to take it. Yeah, that's kind of about it.
Do you have any other future language goals beyond That, and I mean, we already, honestly, I mean, the speaking is kind of what you mentioned earlier. That's like kind of your next pursuit, right?
Yeah, and I didn't mention something else, which is I want to do Japanese YouTube videos.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on my to-do list as well.
Okay, cool.
And I don't know what form that would take, like maybe Minecraft videos, maybe tech videos. I do have both of those angles.
All right.
My gaming YouTube channel is like Minecraft videos in English. So I have to like specify that. That I actually do in the style of Japanese YouTube videos. So I have the subtitles, I have the sound effects. I do like these kind of ridiculous Japanese game showy-esque videos,
Okay.
which is a lot of fun. But I do think if I got to the level where I could do videos in Japanese, that'd be really cool for me.
And that might be like a good way to start practicing your speaking.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's all in there. And yeah, I just want to keep getting better and keep using it. It's a lot of fun.
Before we end this episode, I think it's really important for us to ask you what advice out of everything that you've talked about so far, and maybe things that you haven't discussed with us yet, what advice would you give to other Japanese language learners who may be in similar situations as you or just trying to learn Japanese by themselves? Are there specific tips or insights you wish to, let people know about that you wish you knew about earlier on in your studies?
I do actually have quite a bit to say here, I think. If I may dive into programming for a second.
Go for it.
When you learn programming, the biggest advice that you get is make something, make a project, program a real thing that you really want to use. And I think people should look at it like that in Japanese too, in learning languages. Think to yourself, why are you learning Japanese? Do you really love anime, or do you like VTubers? Whatever you like. I think from day one, go and try to do it. Try to experience it, and that will take you where you need to go. If you, for example, all you want to do is watch anime, there are certain paths you can go down that may ignore certain aspects of the language, right? Like if you want to watch anime, maybe don't do speaking for a while. There's so much to do in Japanese. You could learn how to write kanji. You could, I don't know, whatever. You could. There's a lot of things you could do in Japanese, right? So if you wanted to learn anime specifically, you would focus on the listening aspect, right? If you wanted to read books, read novels or stuff, you go start reading. I think that's how you should focus on these beginner levels. Actually aim towards something. Now, I mean, I could give examples about what I like Japanese from zero at the start. There's really so many different things you can choose. I would just say find something really fast at the start. Find a series that draws you in for whatever reason and just go with the series. There is a black hole you can fall into where every single day you start over and type into Google, how do I learn Japanese? And this is a trap that a lot of people can fall into. I'm, of course, guilty myself, where you just say, I'm struggling. This is really hard. Why can I not learn this? And you go to Google and you say, Google, tell me, how do I learn? And there must be some method I'm missing. Yeah, maybe there is, but for the most part, the gains that you could possibly get by finding a better Japanese method are never going to be worth it. They're never going to outweigh the amount of time that you're not going to be studying. So just go and pick something. And if it's working for you and you like it, just keep going. That's what I did as much as I could. Yeah, and of course, now we're going to get into my specific opinions. I think the best way to learn is this kind of focused immersion approach, where you're watching content, you're reading content, listening content, whatever. You're actually engaging with the language. It's even better if you have something you really want to watch, but that's not even required. And then find areas in that, even as a beginner, where you are missing just a little piece. And they call this I+1, where there's one piece of information you don't understand, and you can go pull that out and try to figure that piece out, and then you'll understand it all in context. This is not as easy as it sounds, actually. But if you can do this as just part of your brain every single day you're engaging with Japanese, I think that's the way that you improve. That's the way I've always improved. I mean, I was not able to do it at the start at all. I just kind of let Japanese wash over me. It's kind of like how I talk to myself. If I'm not focused, it's just washing over me. It's going in one ear, out the other. I'm not listening. I'm not paying attention. Getting better is really attributed to how much you can focus. And I think that's good for now.
I feel the same way sometimes when I'm watching. I'll put on, we have some streaming services and stuff that we use to put on for our kids, to watch kids shows, but then it also has other channels where you can watch other programming and whatnot. And there are times when I'm sitting there and I'm actually engaged and trying to listen and watch, and I'll pick up, a good bit, but not everything. And then I'll sometimes try to look it up, but by then, I go back and they've already moved ahead 5 minutes into the show or whatever, right? So it's always hard to do it when you're doing that on some kind of thing when you're just watching it on TV. But there are times, like you said, it's just washing over you. And like you're like you're hearing it, and it just is like being baptized in Japanese.
It can feel like that.
Yeah. And it's sometimes, I mean, it's good sometimes to have that because there is definitely something that comes with experiencing a language firsthand, whether it's just like actively listening or participating in a conversation, like being able to be attentive, even if you don't understand anything, hearing it, you pick up like little nuances of just how intonation changes and like what means what and the flow, right? And people's reactions to things and things like that. So I feel like that's, even when you don't understand the words, you can pick up on expressions and emotions and reactions and things to use in scenarios. Like, okay, I get the gist. She's shocked. So she's saying bikkurishita. That's got to mean something where she's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. You can kind of pick that up out of context. And if you see that multiple times, then it kind of reinforces it without actually ever picking up a dictionary and saying, what does this mean? So I'm right there with you. It's good days and bad days, good shows, bad shows, in terms of like you understand some things, like you watch it, and you're like, wow, I understood 70% of that. Oh, wow, I'm lost. Like what's going on here?
Yep. Along those lines, if things aren't working for you, change it up.
Yep.
I know I literally just said pick something and stick with it, but there is also like you're going down some path and you're like, oh, I'm 3 months into this, I don't feel any better. We'll change it up. Yeah. I think like you got to listen to yourself when it comes to this.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Before we wrap everything up, I know we got some great advice from you, great tips, and honestly, a lot of it hit home for both of us. I know Jen and I both have engaged in Japanese study along the way. To this day, even though I'm not seriously like book studying or anything like that, I find myself watching TV. I'm like listening, and I'm like, I pick up things, and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm learning, But I wanted to give you an opportunity to let people know anything else that you may be working on. Like you mentioned your YouTube channels, your videos. We'll definitely link out your Japanese language journey videos in our notes, on our show notes. But anything else that you may want to let people know about, or if you have like a Hello Talk thing or Discord or anything like that, go for it.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you guys for having me on. I am by no means a master Japanese speaker, but I've had so much fun learning Japanese, and I appreciate the opportunity to hang out and talk about my journey here. I have a website, www.waldens.world. You can go there and check out everything I've done on the internet. Of course, I'm really into these Minecraft videos right now, but I don't imagine there's a lot of overlap there. I have 2, I think they're really good 30-minute Japanese language videos, so check those out. They're on my channel with a bunch of crap you also should not watch that has nothing to do with Japanese, so just ignore those. I've also got a Discord. You can find it on www.waldens.world. There's a link to it. There's a couple people there who are talking to me about Japanese and my other projects as well. Yeah, if you're interested in any of those, I'm happy to talk to anyone who reaches out to me, comment on the video or whatever. I'm just a dude. I'm not very popular, so it'll be pretty easy, I assure you.
Thank you for reaching out to us, because you reached out to us. You came with an idea, and we tell our listeners, like, if you have something that you're passionate about, a topic, and you want to hear about it, whether you can't speak to it or not, let us know, because we're more than happy to go down any route. And I think this is a fantastic one, because we were talking about doing like a language when we're thinking, then your email came in talking about your self-study and your video. And I was like, man, I talked to Jen off the line, and we're like, this is a great idea for an episode, just because so many people want to study Japanese. But especially in Louisiana, there's not a lot of opportunities unless you're in a university, specifically. I mean, I think New Orleans,
you've just got to do it. Yeah, you've got to decide you want to do it. You got to make a plan, and you got to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, also, I didn't mention this, but maybe it's not fun, and that maybe that's okay. That's another aspect of this too.
You got to start to, you can't quit until you start. And then if you don't feel it, or if you're not feeling it, you don't like it.
If you don't try, you never know what you missed.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it's something you want and you just sit there and, you never start, and it's like, well, I wouldn't like it. Well, how do you know you wouldn't like it?
Right.
You don't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're point to end the episode on, but
I know, right? Like language episode, just keep trying, go through the dark times. It's like at the end, well, maybe if you don't like it, just quit. If you don't like
we might cut that whole section.
No, I mean, that's the truth, though. It's like if it's not something that sticks, then it's okay to admit that, but try and find out. And sometimes the only way you can do it is through self-study. And you gave some fantastic tips for people to give a shot, to try it out and see what works for them. Maybe immersion doesn't work. Maybe something else was better, but they won't find out unless they try.
Exactly.
So thank you again. We love talking about Japanese language podcast episodes. It's fun for us to kind of go down that road. So thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Krewe of Japan podcast. A huge thank you to Walden Perry for a few things. For reaching out to us with the idea for this episode last summer, and also for coming on and sharing all these awesome tips and stories about his language learning journey. I think one of my biggest takeaways, and I'm sure Walden agrees, is that we can all call these language journeys for a reason. Everyone learns differently and at their own pace. And it's absolutely realistic to expect that it won't always be sunshine and roses every single day of that journey. What worked for someone else may not work for you. But by listening to others' journeys, you can get the inspiration you need to aim for that lofty goal, the motivation to push through the tough times, and maybe even a new approach you hadn't considered before. And I strongly feel Walden's journey, shared with us today, did just that. If you are interested in checking out Walden's YouTube videos breaking down his progress at the year 1 and year 2 points of his journey, I'll have those linked out in the show notes. Are you self-studying Japanese? What approach do you find most helpful for you? Share with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, YouTube, at Krewe of Japan Podcast. That's KREWEOFJAPANPODCAST. While you're there, give us a follow, comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever floats your boat. Let us know how you're enjoying the podcast. Or perhaps you prefer to provide your feedback in a more private setting. Do like Walden did and send us an email at kreweofjapanpodcast@gmail.com. I'll spell it one more time. KREWEOFJAPANPODCAST@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you. Speaking of feedback, if you're enjoying what you're listening to today, or the previous episodes of Season 5, or any of our other previous seasons, please feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and or review on your favorite podcast streaming app. Every single one of those 5-star ratings and reviews helps others interested in Japan and this kind of content find the podcast. Or, just let a friend know about us. We won't turn that down either. I'm 100% sincere when I say that any and all support is incredibly appreciated. But that's it for today. Until next time. Looking to start your own podcast and don't know what platform to use? Tell me about it. When we started the Krewe of Japan podcast, we tried a bunch of the big name recording platforms, but always came back to the one we're still currently using to this day, Zencastr. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. In addition to its high audio and video quality for podcast production, Zencastr provides a full suite of production tools to record, produce, and publish studio quality content from the comfort of your home. Just log in through your browser and start recording. It's that simple. For us, we simply send out links to our guests and they join the lobby. But before you know it, it's all done and you have your studio quality audio and up to 4K video right there ready for you, right when you finish. The best part is having their multi-layered backups to ensure that your recordings are in the highest quality, regardless of anyone's internet connection stability. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcasts in one place and distribute to all the major destinations. It's really that easy. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code Krewe of Japan, KREWEOFJAPAN, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's your time to share your story.